Well, hello there. Welcome. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of HRI Talks. My name is Garvia Bailey, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, tonight, we will explore how online gambling differs from traditional gambling, who's most at risk, and what it means for mental health. We have an expert panelist. Our panelists are top notch tonight, and they're going to share research findings and lived experiences that highlight risk factors for problem online gambling, its impact on mental health, and strategies. This is so important, this part, strategies to reduce harm. We have so many registrants to today's session, representation from all over Canada, from every province. We're also very happy to welcome a few of our international participants. Thank you all for being here. HRI Talks are about presenting new ideas. They're about discoveries and studies that are helping to transform the mental health and substance use health landscape in Canada, and of course, as I mentioned, beyond. HRI works with some of North America's most influential scientists, researchers, people with lived experience, and clinicians to deliver these sessions. Tonight's presentation, I'm pretty excited about. I feel like it's on the top of mind for so many people. This session will begin with a moderated conversation with our expert panelists for approximately 20 minutes. We're going to get through some questions. After that, this is so important. We want to open up the floor to your questions. So I encourage you, when something comes up, to go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen at any point. If your memory is like mine, you're going to want to do this at any point in the talk and jot in your questions. And we'll answer as many questions as we can before we wrap up. But first, we'll do the moderated part, but please feel free to hit that Q&A button and put in your questions. Now, closed captioning and transcription services are available for this event. So to enable these features, you just click the CC button on your screen. You'll see it right there. You can also turn on live translation through your Zoom settings. So if you need translation services, that's there as well. If at any time throughout this talk you need support, we've added resources in the chat. So please take advantage of all of that information that will be in the chat. It's to the right of your screen if you're just facing the screen. I'd like to share that the offices of HRI are located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis peoples, and the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am usually in Toronto, which is Treaty 13 and Williams Treaty Land. And I want to invite you to think about decolonizing your own mindset as we think about healthcare and how to care for one another. HRI supports the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action, continually working to be more inclusive in research and in everyday practices. HRI looks to promote reconciliation and healing and invites input on how to do better moving forward. Now, an event like this does not happen without sponsors, so HRI Talks are made possible by the generous support of these sponsors. We sincerely thank all of our contributors, with special thanks to our presenting sponsor, CIBC. Okay, are we ready to go? I'd love to introduce our expert panel now. Dr. Iris Balotis is an associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral neuroscience at McMaster University. She's coming to us from the hammer. Her research explores motivation and decision-making using brain imaging and behavioral methods in both substance and non-substance use disorders. Thank you, Iris, for being here. I can call you Iris, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you at HRI for having me.
And Andre Busenius, is previously a speaker for the Problem Gambling Resources Network, draws on her own and others' lived experiences with gambling and substance use challenges to inspire change. She speaks at schools, community groups, conferences, and works so hard to reduce stigma, humanize addiction, and create space for healing. Andre, it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much to HRI and to Carvia for having me. Thank you.
And Dr. Andrew Kim is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Toronto Metropolitan University and is a registered clinical psychologist in Ontario. He holds a Canada Research Chair in Addictions and Mental Health Comorbidity. Dr. Kim's research has examined the impacts of recent legislative changes to both sports betting, which we cannot get away from, and sports betting advertisements, which we cannot get away from, on gambling behaviors. It's great to have you here, Dr. Kim. And if it's okay, I'm going to call you Andrew for our session. Okay, great. Tonight, I want to lay the land real quick, lay the groundwork for what we're going to do. We're going to explore how recent legal changes and advances in technology have made online gambling more accessible and contributed to increased participation across Canada. We're also going to explore why certain groups, young adults, women, lower income individuals, can be more vulnerable to gambling related harms. Very important. And then we want to talk about the tools and strategies that are available to reduce harm and where gaps still exist in prevention and support systems. Now, through this session, we will also ask for your participation. And when I say you, I mean you who are listening that are not on the panel. We want you to participate in this moderated discussion through the polls that we're going to throw up. You're going to get a chance to just click your response once the polls go up. It's easy. It's not complicated. No one's marking you on your answers, and they're anonymous. All right. I think we can just jump in right now. And I want to start with the landscape. Like, I think it's very important to know where we're at. So how's the landscape of online gambling changing in Canada, and what trends are you noticing as online options grow? And I want to throw this to you, Andrew, first. What are you seeing out there right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there has been several key changes that have happened in the past several years. One is applicable to Canada as a country, where single event sports betting has been legalized. So prior to this, single event betting was illegal. So you had to at least make a bet on 3 or more outcomes. But now you can just make a bet on one outcome if it's that the Leafs are going to beat the Senators, which I think makes sports betting a bit more accessible. The other big change is happening in Ontario, or has happened in Ontario. So generally, the gambling landscape has been run by provinces. So the provinces would have a corporation that would be the ones that regulate and provides gambling opportunities. Ontario opened up the markets. So now you have all these big gambling companies like Bet365 that legally have applied to get licenses in Ontario and can now offer gambling opportunities. And I think an impact of that is increased advertisements. You see them everywhere. You really can't escape them. And it's given people so much access to gambling opportunities, especially online and mobile devices. It's like having a casino in your pocket. And I think what that does is I think it can increase the rates of gambling among Canadians. And we're starting to see a bit of that.
Are you seeing that on the ground, Andre? Are you seeing that with the kids that you speak to? You know the landscape from just being around this. Tell me what you're seeing.
So basically what the difference now, as Andrew had mentioned, is access. And so, when I first started gambling in 2003, when I when VLTs and casinos first came to Alberta in 1992, that was like, before that, it was, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We just didn't have access like we do now. And we knew that if we went to Vegas, we could sort of go lose our minds, behave badly, and come back and live our lives normally. And I don't think we've ever really explained well the harm that can occur with a gambling addiction or with a gaming addiction, because it's invisible. So I just feel like we have transferred from, introducing gambling into our society to now just increasing access without really talking about some of those harms that could exist.
Yeah. And this is what we want to get into for sure. Iris, are you seeing trends or noticing anything that is popping up in your studies?
Yeah, I think as well, just piggybacking on both what Andrew and Andre have said, just the changes are extremely rapid at this point that are occurring. And a lot of it does relate to increased accessibility, increased options online. And it's this sort of ease of access with privacy that happens often online. There's a lot of anonymity that can happen as well. With a lot of online experiences, it's a better game experience. So for example, you can get immersed very easily into many of the games. And so this really fosters people to play much longer than they might otherwise, and also fosters the risk of developing problems with gambling. And I think many people aren't aware of the massive gambling industry that's growing. I can speak probably most to the province of Ontario, where I am, and we had in Ontario here, as Andrew mentioned, this province became the first one to regulate online gambling in sports in 2022. And so I'm sure that everyone here watching today has been exposed to ads for all sorts of different gambling opportunities that now exist. There's so many different websites. At the touch of a button, you can have anything on your smartphone. But this massive industry in Ontario alone last year generated about $3.2 billion for Ontario iGaming revenue, and about 70 billion with a B, $70 billion in wagers in 1 year. And this is going up very, very rapidly. And Andrew and I conducted a study just prior to the launch of iGaming Ontario in 2022. And we found that in this province, the rates of problem gambling were much higher than had previously been reported. And this is prior to the launch of iGo. It used to be around 2 or 5%. We're starting to see rates reported closer to 9%, and others are reporting even higher rates now. So one of the most worrying facts is that despite the fact that we have this new industry that's generating massive revenue, there's a complete lack of objective, independent research to monitor the current situation. What's going on? How is this landscape exactly changing?
Yeah, and it's been, as just a layperson that's just looking at it, it just happened so quickly. It just felt like we went from zero to it is everywhere in such a short amount of time. I want to give the audience a chance to just take part in this poll. Norm, can you throw this poll up? And it's about participating in online gambling. And the question is, have you ever participated in online gambling? Of course, all these answers are anonymous. The points are, I play regularly. I've tried it a few times. I have family or friends who play regularly. No, but I'm curious about the topic. Or you can just opt out. You prefer not to say. I want to also talk about the links between online problem gambling and mental health, and why some people are at a greater risk. So let's keep that answer in our pockets. And can I see what the poll answers are? What we've got for numbers there? Okay. This is so a small percentage play regularly. A small percentage if you tried a few times, but we are all very curious about the topic. So thank you for that. So let's go to this question. Can you tell us about the links between online problem gambling and mental health and why some people may be at greater risk? Can I start with you, Iris?
Yeah, thank you for this question because many people don't think of the potential harms associated with gambling. And so when I talk about problem gambling, I always like to draw attention to the alarmingly high rates of suicide that are associated with
Mm,
problem gambling. So there are studies in the community that show many people suffering from problem gambling report suicide ideation. And those individuals that are looking for treatment, for help with their problem gambling, there's often a range, but around 7 to 30% have reported previous suicide attempts.
mm,
There's also very recent research showing that as problem gambling severity increases, so too do the risks of suicide attempts as well. So this is a harm that's often not talked about much. Many people don't draw the link from suicide to gambling. They may draw it up to depression or to other factors. Often the direct line is not made. There's still an awful lot of stigma attached to gambling and problem gambling. And so I always like to bring up this fact for everyone to be very aware of.
hmm Andrew, there is research and different pathways for problem gambling. Can you tell me just a little bit about that? About how having a casino in your pocket can create this, this extreme problem for your mental health.
Yeah, so I mean, gambling isn't much different from any other addiction like alcohol and cannabis. Of course,
Mm,
you're not ingesting a substance, but there's been decades of research that show a lot of similarities. And so now gambling is widely recognized as an addiction.
right.
So much like alcohol use disorder or cannabis use disorder, mental health is frequent in problem gambling, and they often go hand in hand. And there are various reasons why this might occur. One could be the direct harm of gambling, as Iris mentioned. Imagine going to the casino, or I guess taking your phone out of your pocket. You're making some bets, and you're now down $200 that you needed for groceries. That could cause a lot of
Wow.
stress, a lot of anxiety, low mood. And for others, gambling can be a way to cope. It could be a way to cope with distress, similar to how someone may use alcohol to help with their symptoms of depression or their trauma. Gambling
Mm-hmm.
can have the exact same effects. So in terms of the pathways to problem gambling, there is a influential model called the pathways model, because they
Mm-hmm.
say there's different pathways into problem gambling. And they recognize three pathways. The first they use a fancy term called behaviorally conditioned. It just means that there isn't any underlying risk factors. When we tend to think of people who may become addicted, right? You have this, I would say, stereotype as often incorrect and stigma. But with gambling, it could just be reinforcement. You start playing, you win, you get hooked. And the more you play, the chances of you becoming addicted or having some problems increases. The
Mm-hmm.
second is that emotional vulnerable pathway. It's using gambling to cope, right? So you have a mental health problem, gambling can help with that distress. And the third is sort of the underlying risk factor of impulsivity, which we know is heightened as a risk factor for various addictions. So there is no one way that
Mm-hmm.
people can become addicted or have problems with gambling. There's multiple pathways that people can fit into.
Right. Andre, you mentioned something when we had our prep calls that kind of blew my mind. Like I haven't stopped thinking about it. Is you talked about the pathway and the similarities between gaming, especially for young people, I'm talking about, and online gambling. Can you unpack that a little bit for me as we talk about mental health?
Sure, absolutely. And I have figured out the mute button, so we're all like good to go here. Um, So, part of, and Andrew touched on this, like I was an escape gambler. I played slot machines to numb and to escape because I knew drinking by myself, in the middle of the afternoon to feel better was wrong. And I knew that narcotics were wrong, but it never occurred to me that gambling could lead to issues or to challenges or to problems. And because that message has not really been carried on, we now have such a blending or a mesh of gaming and gambling. And I have a 14-year-old kiddo who's right embroiled in Fortnite, and he does not not respond to me because he's got, terrible coping skills or because he's a misbehaved child. It's because it's a game that is created as a battle royale that is hard to put down. I mean, for those of us that grew up on Atari or in television, I mean, it would take you 20 minutes to serve the ball over the net, right? You could have a break. There was no, right? There was just no, missing the bus or not wanting to eat or not wanting to go to bed. And I think the conversation that needs to be had now is that, as Andrew mentioned, there has been sort of this stereotype where, we drink because we're depressed or we have bad coping skills or we're looking to numb or to escape. But so many youth or teens or even like toddlers, that's just not the case. And if something is created to be rewarding and enticing and engaging, you don't have to be broken to want more of that.
Mm-hmm. That is so interesting. So how do you speak to your 14-year-old, if I can just get personal just for a moment, about this?
Well, I mean, he thinks I'm a nightmare like every other 14-year-old thinks of their parent. I have always been really open with him, and we, again, try and set him up for success, meaning I don't expect a 14-year-old to be able to regulate one of the most addictive things on the planet.
Okay.
I just don't. And so if your kiddo or yourself is involved in PS5 or Xbox, our recommendation would be not to hook up your bank account or to your own credit card, because then, in my view, we are asking somebody who is dysregulated, who is in the zone, whose brain chemistry looks identical to somebody who is smoking crack cocaine at that moment, to then make good decisions. Like, oh, I'm not going to just buy, one more life, or I'm not going to just buy the skin. And so I think it's about setting up those boundaries and also like recognizing that there's not a lot that I can offer that's going to be as engaging or enticing as that. But
Right.
I'm the adult in the room. I'm the one that's going to set boundaries for this. And in the early days when he was a little bit younger, we would have conversations because we would see how after he shut the game off, he would be red-faced and agitated and, sometimes kicking furnitures or slamming doors. And so it was like, do you feel better? Like, did you actually, like, let's talk about what you're actually getting out from this. And that is a huge part of my recovery, is that when I look at my gambling addiction, it's very, I don't want to say easy, but it's much easier now, 17 plus years later, to look back and go, there really weren't that many good times.
Right.
And so I think right, like reflecting on how we feel after.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I want to talk about strategies now. And I love what Andre was just talking about as a strategy for young people. But I want to talk about the strategies that have been most effective in preventing problem gambling, particularly in that online space. Andrew, can I start with you in that?
Yeah, and there are some strategies that we as researchers or people with lived experience or policymakers think would be beneficial. Things like mandatory limit setting, not opt-in limit setting, because people don't do that. But I don't think there's much research. I think more needs to be done. And I'm going to speak to the Ontario context. And I think they sort of opened up this Pandora's box without putting a lot of things in place to keep it safe. So there hasn't been much regulation. There wasn't any consultations with researchers, with stakeholders, with people with lived experience, because now once the cat's out of the bag, it's going to be really difficult to put it back in, especially with mobile devices, with the number of gambling operators. For example, self-exclusion is one option that's available for folks that are experiencing problem gambling.
And that's just shutting it off, just getting rid of it. Like, what's self-exclusion?
Self-exclusion is banning yourself from a casino. It was
Right.
much easier when it was just Ontario, because you just
Yeah.
were one casino, you self-exclude, and for the most part, you can't enter anything else.
Hmm.
But now you have to self-exclude from BetMGM. You have to
Yeah.
self-exclude from Sports Interaction. There are dozens of gambling operators. So I
Hmm.
think it would have been helpful to have this central system that could all just be connected.
Hmm.
So there are things that can be done.
Hmm.
I just don't think they haven't been done yet.
Are people talking about them being done though? Do we feel like that there's movement in that? Like, has it been flagged as a problem? As far as those that are writing legislation.
I mean, among researchers and
Yeah.
policymakers, but I'm not sure how far it's gone towards sort of legislation. And the problem is research moves a lot slower than what's
Hmm.
happening. So it's
Yeah.
going to take some research to catch up. Yeah, I think there are things that can be done, just haven't been done yet.
I want to speak to the researcher about that. And that would be you, Iris, about measuring. Like, I mean, what do we need to do in order to present the best of the data to legislators and to those that are kind of setting up the parameters right now?
Yeah, I think this would have been ideal to happen in Ontario as the test balloon going forwards with online gambling. But unfortunately, as Andrew said, there's little to no research going on. Very little funding for research. If we don't even know the scope of the problem, how can we even start to address it, start to measure it? We have, as he mentioned, certain ideas that we can take from other forms of gambling, but sometimes, with a different platform, things can be very different. We don't know that the same strategies will work for sure. And yeah, we just there is so much work that needs to be done in this space, and unfortunately, as researchers, we're really challenged in moving forwards at this point.
Mhm. I want to make sure that we have time for our the questions coming up. So I want to ask you, Iris, about for those people that are experiencing harm or potential harm from online gambling. Um, what have you seen as being the most the supports that have been the most effective?
Yeah,
Like
so
what?
we know from research studies in gambling in general that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and motivational interviewing, MI, a combination of these two, tend to work well for helping people with disordered gambling, but I did want to mention some of the work that I've done as well in terms of knowledge translation of some
Mhm.
of the research. As someone working in the space of neurobiology, I worked together with a counselor, Deirdre Corney, at Alcohol, Drug, and Gambling Services of Hamilton, and we developed a series of products to provide clinicians and clients and people with lived experience, responsible gambling operators, for everyone, basically arm people with tools about gambling in the brain, because many
Mhm.
people have questions, and in the past 20 years or so, I would say that the neuroscience of gambling and problem gambling has come quite far. And so we've tried to answer questions using evidence, using neurobiological evidence, that we try and answer questions that people seeking treatment have asked themselves. So questions like, now that I've stopped gambling, why does nothing feel like fun anymore? How
Huh.
is gambling like alcohol or drugs from my brain's point of view? What do we know about slot machine features and the brain? And all of the materials we develop are evidence based. And so we try and link back to the current state of the scientific evidence. And we've developed a website, brainconnections.ca, that everyone is welcome to check out, and everything is downloadable from there. We've had a lot of positive feedback from the general community, from clinicians, people with lived experience, researchers, educators. Um, as I said, we have videos, all sorts of materials there. We have many educators, particularly in the last 2 years, approaching us to use this material as part of their curriculum in schools and in university settings as well. And just to link back to what we were talking about before, the fusion between gambling and gaming that's occurring, we have added a new section specifically around youth and problem gambling and gaming in this population, including a video as well. So I encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great. I just want to remind everyone that if you have questions, please put that into the Q&A in the menu, Q and A button in the menu at the bottom of your screen, because we're going to open up to questions in 2 short minutes. I want to continue that question about people experiencing harm or potential harm from online gambling. What supports have you seen that are effective? And I want both Andrew and Andre to answer this question. Andrew, I'll start with you, and then we'll go right to Andre right after.
Yeah, so just quickly, as yours mentioned, we have good evidence of what works, and it's same with what works with alcohol and cannabis or addiction. So CBT, MI, there have been brief interventions, self-help, there are online support. So if you are experiencing problem gambling or know of someone that is, there is really good evidence and treatments that are developed using rigorous science. So they're widely available. Most provinces, if not all, would have free treatment services. So I would encourage you to seek them out.
Thank you for that. And Andre?
Yeah, again, like, even though we're more connected, I would debate that we've never been more isolated. And I think it's really important to be reaching out to others for support. And for somebody who myself grew up believing that addiction was all about willpower and self-control and sort of all those risk factors that we talk about, it never occurred to me that Gamblers Anonymous existed. And once I found Gamblers Anonymous, it saved my life, because being able to see yourself and recognizing that it's not just a character flaw. It's not just I'm weak and I'm terrible and I'm stupid. Like, you did that too, and you did that too. And no, it's not for everybody, but nothing is for everybody. And what we say in recovery is that if we put 1/10 of the energy in our recovery that we spent using, that we will be successful. So if somebody tries Gamblers Anonymous or goes to one meeting and they're like, I hate it, I hate everyone there, and everyone just then you go to another and another and another. Or there's Kids Help Phone, or there's the distress line, or there is tons and tons of support. And I think that what keeps most people sick is that mentality of like throwing in the towel. Like, I'm late for class, I'll skip the class. I failed the exam, I'll drop, right? Like, I get fries, I get crazy, and we just sort of go in hard. And gambling is so much worse because it's invisible. And so the shame just deepens and deepens. And we just end up hitting bottom sooner because of how much we lose so much quicker, and because it's hidden. And so it's so critical that we arm ourselves with the resources. If I'm seeing 30 gambling advertisements a day or an hour, that at least I can be able to identify 3 places about where to get support. And that's what I challenge the students to. Like, how many sport advertisements do you see? Betting advertisements? How many places do you know to get support? And we've got to get that ratio better.
That is such great math. That's the good math. I like that math. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go to a poll, and then we're going to go right to questions. Do you think, can we throw that poll up, Norm? Do you think there's enough public awareness about the potential mental health harms of online gambling? Yes, most people are aware. Partially, awareness varies across groups. No, awareness is very low. And the last one, I'm not sure. So let's take a look at the poll, and then we're going to go right to some audience questions. A whopping 75% says no, awareness is very low. Is anyone surprised on the panel? I'm going to guess not. No surprises.
No, and I think like for those of us that on the other side of 50 get really intimidated and get really humbled by technology, that our kids know more and they know more to do. And so I think sometimes we stay purposefully like ignorant because we don't
Right.
want to admit that we don't really know what's happening or what's going on or how to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll just add as well,
Well,
there's such a difference with the online environment with so many gambling features now. So I always give the example of sports betting. Before you would just watch your favorite team, now people are literally invested in every single game, in every tiny microtransaction. It is
mhm,
very, very different, and it's become so ubiquitous that
that's right.
many people just think this is normal.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go to audience questions. Hillary is HRI's Manager of Communications, Hillary Dort, and I'd love for you to share our first question.
Thanks so much, Garbia, and thank you to everyone for the fantastic questions. Um, our first audience question actually goes back to some of the comments earlier from our panelists about the similarities between gambling and other substance use issues, so cannabis or alcohol. So this person's asking, do dual addictions or concurrent addictions feed off each other, and can this complicate treatment?
Andrew, I'm going to throw that question at you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And
Hmm.
the research shows that the most common co-occurring mental health or addiction with gambling is substance use.
Mm.
So, substance use tend to be quite common with problem gambling. And yes, they can feed off each other. I've done some research in the context of sports betting, and what we're finding is that if folks are drinking alcohol while betting on sports, that is a very harmful combination. It
Mm.
leads to increased betting, more money spent, increased harms. But unfortunately, I would say alcohol is quite intertwined with sports. They also tend to have this high cultural norm. So, for example, I've always joke around and I say this with alcohol and sports. I'm a huge sports fan, so if I invite my friends to watch the game, I say, let's go to a coffee shop, they're gonna think like, what, a coffee shop? They're
Mhm.
expecting to go to a bar. That's how intertwined they are. But given how alcohol can increase gambling, because you're disinhibited, you're more likely to take risks, and the more you gamble, the more you're likely going to lose. It just kind of
Mhm.
perpetuates that system. Done some
Mhm.
research. On the other hand, when people have recovered from both gambling and alcohol, we asked, how did you do both? They said, well, I drank when I was at the casino. So I wasn't going to the
Mm.
casino anymore. So my alcohol just naturally stopped. So they
Huh.
can be intertwined and it can complicate treatment.
Right, right. Thank you. Hillary.
Thank you so much. So, so the next question is actually around some of the effects of COVID,
Mm.
and if there is any data perhaps available to, I guess, show if there was a difference between gambling before COVID and then after. And of course, there's been legislative changes, but if there's any sort of longer term data that is available on that.
Go ahead, Iris.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. We did some research with colleagues just at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we looked at changes over time. So from about April to August, so about 4-ish months or so, to look at, is there a link between changes in online gambling involvement and mental health problems? And in fact, we did find that changes changes in online gambling. So, for example, gambling more online was tied to having increased mental health problems and greater problem gambling severity. So, this is a very short period of time. We're talking about 4-ish months roughly. And you can think of COVID as a massive stressor that came on all of us all at once. So, you can think of it potentially as a coping mechanism as well. But we also found in some of this work in another interesting characteristic. We talked about previously about other characteristics that might be tied to mental health. And one of the things that we found was around financial motivations, and that these played a key role as well. And we talk about sometimes something called a financially focused self-concept. And this actually predicted changes in gambling. So when we talk about financially focused self-concept, it's a mouthful, but it basically refers to the belief that having money is part of your self-definition, self-worth. You think of yourself as really good with money, flush with money. And so your self-worth is based often on how much money you have. And so someone who's really financially focused with this self-concept believes, for example, also that others will think less of you if you're not doing well financially. And so we see this link between this personality characteristic and changes in online gambling, predicting changes in online gambling as well, which I thought was surprising and very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Andre, I would imagine that you have some insight into what COVID did in terms of the isolation, some anecdotal information about what that kind of isolation might have done to young people's minds, like, and turning to something like gambling, which is something that is done, as we mentioned through this, in isolation. And then COVID puts an extra layer of isolation on top of it.
Yeah, so in Alberta, a couple of things happened in 2020, including the government legalizing playalberta.ca. So part of the challenge in 2020 was that charities and organizations that relied on casino funding then moved into having to do 50-50s or some other type of fundraising because those casinos were closed. And what we saw was this meshing. And what I mean by that is that students would be laying in bed on their computer, zooming into class, and trying to learn on the same devices that they're gaming on. Like, there was just sort of no separation of like church and state, as we would say, right? Like, it's expecting me to go to McDonald's and order a salad. Like, I just don't think it's reasonable to expect students to use the same device that they're Minecrafting on to then like be able to focus on. I think it's just asking too much of lines that were blurred. And when I look at how I grew up, like, cigarettes were stinky on purpose so that we would get caught. And now it's like, it smells like cotton candy or blueberry. Right. And there's like so much gaming, like intertwined with gambling. And I just feel like it's become so blurred that it's the adults' job to sort of tease this apart so that at least we can get them to 18 or 19 or 20 so they can make decisions. Or at least I feel as a parent, they're not preyed upon. It's not always somebody asking for like more and like, you need a loot box or you need to buy this or you need this accessory or you need this. And, you know, most addicts would say like, there's just never enough. And if we're already feeling that at 13, 14, 15 years old, that terrifies me for this next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. Hillary, we have time for a couple more questions, I think.
Absolutely. So we've actually had a recurring question, and it's more about specific populations. So someone is asking about veterans in particular, and there's some discussion about the Invictus Games bringing esports into the mix of competition. But I know separately, there's also been people asking about specifically newcomers to Canada and how some of the stigma, and again, back to the isolation, but stigma when it comes to gambling can help people, and it kind of forces them to hide it a little bit. So if perhaps the panelists could speak a bit to if there are solutions or trends in the research amongst specific populations, I think that would be helpful.
Does anyone want to give that a go? Andrew, I'll start with you, maybe put you on the spot there around the question around the effect and the stigma in very specific populations. I think that the question around veterans and what, you know, as something like the Invictus Games, it's such a noble thing, but then now there's betting attached to it, you know? So really interesting question. Can you start us off, Andrew?
Yeah, so in terms of the question regarding veterans and problem gambling and how to help, the good news is, again, we have pretty good evidence of what works. So similar to
Mm-hmm.
substance use, addictions tend to be very common or can be very common in veteran populations, given the links with trauma. So that's alcohol, cannabis, and gambling. And gambling, as Andre has mentioned, has been a hidden addiction, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
can't see it. But now, given all the research that we've done, there has been some good, at least in the States, changes of how gambling is screened
Mm-hmm.
and the treatments that we have. So it would be addressing both the trauma, if it is trauma related, and gambling at the same time. There are really good evidence-based treatments that have been developed that can help with that. And there's
Mm-hmm.
been good research. So I think we're doing well there and we have the resources to help.
Mm-hmm. I think the second part of that question around is really about isolation or feeling, you know, there's that fish out of water feeling that you get as a newcomer, and then having this device in your pocket or something that you can
Mhm.
turn to that becomes almost a crutch or a companion. So I'm sure that that is a vulnerable population as well.
I think it can be. I've done some of my research that I've done, and this is specific to sports betting. We have seen higher rates of sports betting and problem sports betting among those who've immigrated to Canada or are racialized minorities. You know, I don't want to speak too much of a why I think that could be, but part of it is could be belonging. If I think to myself, as an immigrant myself, I know I was a bit younger, but one thing that helped me connect with my peers was sports,
Mm-hmm.
watching the Leafs, playing soccer.
Sure.
So, I mean, I could see for newcomers that are coming here trying to connect with their peers who are watching sports and betting on sports, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's a way. But
Mm-hmm.
I do think this is a gap in research that we really don't know how it could affect newcomers and vulnerable populations. I know with sports betting, we have a good idea of who's betting on sports and who's likely to engage problems. They're
Mm-hmm.
young, they're young men with disposable income, highly educated, impulsive, and use substances. I think we
Right.
see that across context. But I think in other vulnerable populations, I do think we need more research there.
Right. Right. Thank you for that. Iris, did you want to jump in there on where the research is going, or with these kinds of specific populations?
I think there's so many specific subgroups that we can talk about.
Sure.
There's so many differences in specific populations. So youth versus older adults, males, females, culturally, linguistically diverse. There's so many different subgroups to identify, and it is important that we have more research into understanding the motivations often can be different. For example, there can be cultural motivations for gambling in some subgroups. There's also large differences in willingness to seek treatment in different subgroups. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, we know that females are more likely to seek out treatment faster than males are. So we see trends, and all of these have implications for prevention efforts, for treatment, etc. But there are so many subgroups that we can identify. I do know. I think someone mentioned. I think especially around. I think it was COVID as well. But there was a study, not done by myself, but by somebody else I know, looking at East and South Asians, and I believe it was over the pandemic period in Ontario, and they found that this group in particular reported higher likelihood of severe gambling problems, risky, financially focused gambling motives, and getting back to the co-use idea, so gambling under the influence of alcohol and experiencing other elevated mental health problems. So these are, it's important to understand what features and characteristics are unique in these different groups, so that we can develop appropriate supports.
Mm-hmm. Research, more towards that. Hillary, you have something else for us other than just a question.
I do. So, in the Q&A box, I found a message from Senator Marty Deakin, who is from the Waterloo region. And she's asking if I can share that she's been working on legislation to pull the reins in on gambling advertising. And she's inviting everyone to review Bill S 211, so Bill S 211, and I'm gonna send that in the chat so everyone can have a chance to look it up online. And she's saying it outlines the national framework we are seeking. We have met with many of those doing research in Canada and globally, a small step to make this space better. So thank you so much, Senator Deakin. That's fantastic.
Thank you for sharing that, Hillary. It looks like we're just about out of time. So here's the thing. If we didn't get to your question or you have a comment to share, I'd like for you to feel free to reach out to us. You can find HRI's email address on their website, hriresearch.com. We've posted a link in the chat to a brief survey where you can share your feedback about this event and today's session. The survey will also appear in Zoom immediately after the event. I just want you to take a little bit of time to complete it, because HRI has been doing these wonderful events, and they get better and better because of your feedback. So if you can take some time to fill out that survey, that would be great. Hillary, do we have time for one more question or no?
I think it might be a little tight, but if
it's
I know you always have one last question you like to ask, Carvia.
I do.
You do.
I do. So I'm going to take the floor. We've learned so much tonight, and I'd like to ask each of you one last question. Just in a few words, what do you hope the audience takes away tonight? Iris, I'll start with you. Put you on the spot right away.
Thanks. Yeah, I think getting back to one of the poll questions is just building the awareness that gambling is a public health issue. If you think how much gets dedicated to alcohol, opiate use, cigarettes, we need the same attention put to gambling. It is a public health issue and it affects all of us.
Yes. Andre.
I agree, absolutely. And once we recognize gambling as the mental health disorder that it is, I think things will dramatically change. And I'm very hopeful that, the abundance of gaming that's now available to such a young population, whether it's things like Roblox or Fortnite, and seeing, toddlers in Costco, in the front, playing games, and then 20 minutes later they're having a meltdown and people are like, oh, maybe the lights are too bright. Like, it's more about, maybe about the things that we are ingesting. And so my real hope is that we change that view. You don't have to be ingesting anything or consuming anything in order to get addicted. It's about this process that, Iris and Andrew do a great job about talking.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew.
I echo what Iris and Andre mentioned. Is gambling is a public health concern. It is an addiction. It's a mental health disorder. Good news is we have a lot of research and treatments that can be helpful. And I would say Canada is one of the leaders in gambling research in the world. So we're doing a lot of great here as well.
Mm-hmm. We had or have a senator in the audience. Is there a message that you would want to give to the legislators out there around this? Andrew, I'll start with you because this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I think it's great that there is a framework to look at gambling advertisements. There are national advertisement standards for alcohol, for cannabis, but one didn't exist for gambling or doesn't exist. So it's great that work is being there. I think there are things that can be done. There's evidence-based strategies that could limit the harms. Of course, gambling can be a fun and recreational activity for a lot of people. But for those who are vulnerable, I do think there are things that we can do to minimize the harms.
Mm-hmm. Andre, a word for the senator, quickly.
Yeah, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing. We did it with tobacco and alcohol, so keep doing what you're doing. There's a way. There just needs to be a will, and you have it. So keep going.
Perfect. Iris, a word for the senator.
Yeah, thank you for drawing attention to this. And we talked about the growth of the online gambling industry and the associations with a bunch of public health harm. So governments really need to give attention to this in terms of regulation, monitoring, and so on. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? At this time, I want to thank everyone in the audience, everyone for their amazing questions, wonderful questions, for your time and your care and your attention to this. We have reached the end of our time for this evening's HRI Talk. I want to thank our panel members, Dr. Iris Belotis, Andre Businius, Dr. Andrew Kim. Thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight and sharing your expertise. It was illuminating, and thank you for the work that you do. A recording of this HRI Talk will be shared with you and posted on YouTube in the coming week. We encourage you to share it with others who may be interested. I hate watching myself back, so I might not share it, but all of you should share it. Okay, maybe I'll share it because this is an important topic. Don't forget to subscribe to the HRI Talks mailing list so you'll be the first one to hear about the next event. As a registered charity, donations, they play a vital role in supporting what HRI does, the research, the amplifying impact. If you'd like to donate, simply go to HRI's website and click the donate button. Thank you so much for that in advance. Once again, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, CIBC. We're so grateful to our sponsors and supporters across Canada and beyond for making these HRI Talks possible. I'd like to thank again the audience for joining us and for your keen interest in the topic. And you know what? We're going to see you next time. Thank you all. Have a great night.